Petwal on behalf of VIMHANS team to talk today. I appreciate you taking the time out from your day to come here as part of our ongoing series on mental health in children and adolescents. Today's talk is on the topic Evolving Self, Evolving Personality in Children and Youth. Our speaker for today is Dr. Pratishtha Petwal, consultant clinical psychologist at VIMHANS New Delhi. She completed her MPhil and PhD in clinical psychology from National Institute of Mental Health and Neuroscience, Bangalore. She primarily worked with adults presenting with common mental disorders such as depression and anxiety related disorders, as well as various personality related issues. She has also done extensive research on topic of rumination, self-compassion, and procrastination over the years. I now invite Dr. Petwal to take over the podium.
Hi, welcome all. So we are today talking about the self and the personality. So the topic is evolving self and evolving personality in children and youth. I will take you through what we understand about personality a little bit, but majorly be talking about self, which is one aspect of personality. And then we'll also be talking about what are the ways in which we can build this sense of self in our children and our youth today. So to start, I'm talking about personality first, and the way we understand personality is as this unique and stable qualities that characterize an individual's behavior across different situations over time. So if I have to talk about personality, I think the way we understand personality, we use a lot of terms saying this is how my personality is, and we might use just one aspect of how we are and how we behave or how we think or how we feel. So personality indeed overall is comprised of these characteristics across different domains. It can be your thinking, it can be your feeling, your emotional reactions, it can be your behavioral patterns, it can also be how you attach yourself to relationships, it can be how much impulse control you have. So it can be a lot of aspects which are also relatively stable. So if I do something a few times, that doesn't really comprise my personality, but something that I do across situations, something that I do repeatedly in a very stable manner is what comprises my personality. So how does the personality form? From what we understand, personality is formed based on genes. So basically my genetic hereditary component, and further it is then shaped by different experiences that I have over the years as children, as youth. So there are two things that we talk about usually when we talk about personality, which I just said. One is our temperament. So temperament is something we are all born with. It's an innate tendency to respond in certain ways. So a child may have an anxious temperament or a fearful temperament or an easy temperament. And then further, once the child has certain temperament, and then that further combines with what we call in psychology as character, not how we understand character in layman terms, but character basically comprises of all the experiences that I have over the years. So as a child, my experiences in school, my experiences at home, my experiences in my culture, in my environment, everything that happens to me comprises of, makes up my character. And these two components, the temperament and the character, then comprises the personality. So personality is not something, one, that we are born with only that, or something that we've learned only that. It's basically both of them together. So like we're talking about, how is it formed? Some traits appear to be inborn. So there's a lot of research that shows that some traits are inborn. They do tend to have a tendency to be hereditary, to be inherited, and while some other are shaped by our environment while we're growing up. So like we said, it's the heredity component, and then it's the environment. If we talk about what traits specifically are made up of the heredity, or what traits really are shaped by the environment, we can't really say that any one trait is only determined by either one. But usually there is evidence that indicates that certain traits like shyness, anxiety, or aggressiveness or even some creative abilities may be inherited also. And most of these traits are then further modified by the environment that the person stays in. Every experience that I have over time modifies these inherited traits. So what does my environment include? How does this modification occur? It is comprised of all of these aspects. It's comprised of my peer groups, my friends, my experiences at school, my experiences at home with my family members, as well as my culture, which is the macro system, which is overall what are the cultural experiences I have, even things like media, what the child hears, what the child sees on the media majorly, which is an influence of society at large, is what basically then modifies those inherited traits and leads to the personality being formed. So this personality is formed also through a lot of modeling. One aspect that we understand is that children observe and learn. So modeling is a very important aspect in terms of how a child learns to respond in certain ways. So a lot of times if we see someone wherein they have a tendency to be aggressive, again this may be something that is inherited to some extent, but to have anger outbursts, but then over the years if the child has also been exposed to a lot of, say, violence, or seeing people be emotionally dysregulated, have a lot of anger outbursts, then this child might model that behavior, might observe and learn to respond to situations emotionally in a certain way. Similarly, if a child is observed being respectful of people, then they might actually start behaving and having those behavioral patterns. Another important aspect is the peer group, like we said. So friends who are of similar age and share similar interests is what usually comprises a child's peer group. And this gives them a chance to learn about themselves and have a good relationship with others. So a lot of what forms my personality and how I look at myself might also be influenced by the people that I see around me, including my friends, and how they're acting towards me, what they think about me. So the peer group also is a very important part of my environment. One aspect that we are specifically going to talk about today is the self, or the sense of self and a self-concept. So, before I start to talk about the self, I want to know if the primary question that we all would ask anyone is, okay, can you describe yourself? The first question in an interview is, can you describe yourself? Can you tell me who you are? Or the question that is asked, who am I? Which a lot of us might feel that I don't know how to answer, but just if anyone can tell me, what would they usually say if asked the question, who are you, or can you describe yourself? What would you say if anyone would want to answer that?
Generally, people give like basic demographics, like what work they do, or if they're married, or like
Right.
whatever, their family,
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
their age.
Right. So who are you? Okay, I'm so and so, my name and my age, and I'm married and I'm not married, or my family. Anything else that you think? Yeah.
I have been in the HR field for around 15 years, and during my recruitment years, this was one of the questions, very first initial questions, and usually they used to answer connected to their skills.
Right.
That was where the answer usually came around. But family came only when we asked them to tell about your family.
Right.
Your family.
So it might also be the context that they are in. That
Yes.
When you choose.
Yeah, because that was their in their mindset that they have come for a job.
Right. So yes, absolutely. So myself also comprises of that. My abilities, my talents, my knowledge, my skills. Anything else that you used to?
Like use the professional suit, like they're in the world, no one exactly like me, because every person is every that their fingers are different from one perspective.
So they'll
Even they work in the same portfolio, they are the difference.
Absolutely. So self would be different and they'll be defined.
What I feel is whenever somebody asks a person to introduce himself or herself, first thing comes in the mind of that person is what environment and what circumstances that person is. Accordingly, that person answers. If it is a professional place, then the person answers like that. If it's a social group, then the person answers like that. So that comes only depending upon the circumstances the person is.
Absolutely. So there may be a lot of selves.
Yes.
Myself here and myself when
Yes.
I'm with people of my family.
Because
or my
I may
friends.
not introduce myself whether I'm married or not in a professional group. I may not introduce myself too detailed about my profession in a social group.
Right.
So that makes sense.
Right. Okay. And yeah, so I think we have good enough responses, and everyone understands that the self is different. The self can be my basic demographic details. The self can be what I'd say in terms of my knowledge, skills, abilities. The self can be my uniqueness, how I'm different from others, or the self can also be different things at different points in time that I may define, which is basically how it is. When we talk about self-concept or self-identity, again, it's a huge umbrella term under which we might have different selves and different ideas of what comprises myself, which I'll talk about later. But yes, so the self-concept or self-identity is this global understanding I have of myself, of who I am basically. And again, this might comprise of all of these different aspects that we talk about. So it is basically composed of relatively permanent self-assessments. So like someone said, it can be my knowledge of skills and abilities, it can be my personality attributes, that this is how I usually respond to situations. I'm an emotional person, or I'm lazy, someone might say. So the way they usually respond, their patterns is what they use. It can be my occupation and my hobbies, it can be my physical attributes also, body image that the person might have. But again, these are usually, when you say self-concept, this is something, an understanding I have formed of myself based on a lot of different factors. So this is what it may be comprised of. It may change with time and may even possibly go through turbulent periods of identity crisis and reassessment, which is also something we see a lot during adolescence. And that's the period during which youths or adolescents go through a lot of identity disturbance sometimes, where they're trying to find out who they really are, and they basically consolidate the idea of self. Of course, when we say it may change with time, it is not something that changes every day. It's not that, oh, who I am and today I'm tired. That's not how it is. It's not every day. It's something that might change over the course of years. That at certain phase in my life, I feel this is what defines me more and this is how I respond. But that might change and my patterns might change. And I might identify with something else completely at a certain different area of my life, a part of my life. So what is the self-image, which is this image I have in my head of myself? Of course, we all know that we think, we feel, we reflect, and that is how we also form our self-image. How do I think about myself? What do I think about myself? How do I feel about myself? And in my reflections, what do I see I might be characterized as? So that is what comprises this image I have of myself. We form an identity and we basically attach a meaning to it. So, the example here is that two people may get fired from the same job, but only one person finds it devastating because probably, that's what they are identifying with, that's what their self or their identity is based on, and that's why they are affected much more by it. So the meaning I attach to a certain identity also decides how I respond to it, or how my image of myself, whether that identity fits into that self-image. So that is what the self-image is comprised of, which is a person's perception of his or herself. There's an interesting concept of self-fulfilling prophecies that really plays a huge role here, and which means that when we believe something about ourselves, we are more likely to act in ways that correspond to our beliefs, thus reinforcing our beliefs and encouraging the same behavior. So what it means is that this is where my self-image, my idea of myself becomes very important. Because a lot of times, based on what I think about myself or how I look at myself, I might actually respond to situations based on that. If I think that I'm someone who's very good at problem solving, I'm actually more likely to problem solve things. It might really not be about my skill or ability exactly, but just that I think I can solve a problem. So that is where self-fulfilling prophecies have been found to be very important. But what I think about myself, I will actually act to sort of confirm that belief I have of myself. And so for especially like children and youth, it becomes very important of what image they have of themselves, what idea they have of themselves, because that's probably what is going to lead to their behavior patterns also. They'll act based on that idea of themselves. So like someone who said that yes, we have different identities, different selves in different situations. We might act based on whatever we feel fits into that context, or we might respond to the question of who am I based on the self that is most relevant in that context. So there are different selves in different situations, and what can these different selves be? These are just terms, but this just sort of tells us comprehensively what everything can be. For example, one is the actual self, which is how I actually see myself. When I'm by myself and I know, okay, this is who I am, I think. So how you see yourself. And then there's the ideal self, which is how I would like to see myself. The ideal self is this idea I have of what I should be, and a lot of times this is shaped from, by my experiences, and whatever I've heard from people around me is oh, this is how a person should be. So the ideal self can be based on my values, can be based on what I value. For one person it may be that my ideal self is that I should be more generous, whereas for another person it may be that my ideal self is that I should be this very successful person. So ideal self will depend on the values that I hold. And then there's the social self, which is how you think others see you. So the social self is what I think I am in social situations. There's the ideal social self, which is how you would actually like others to see you. So this is how I am in social situations. Say maybe I am this person who doesn't speak much, but then I know that the ideal is that I want people to look at me as someone who's funny, someone who's interesting. So I have this ideal social self in my head of how people should see me. And then there's the expected self, which is how you expect to be in the future. That okay, in the future this is what I expect to be or anticipate to be. And the ought to self is the qualities that one thinks that they should possess, again based on a lot from my society, my culture, as to the specific qualities that I feel I should be possessing, myself should be possessing, is the ought to self. So what are the different dimensions of self-concept here that we are talking about? And I think we spoke about it briefly when everyone was answering the questions. That one is my self-knowledge, which is basically who am I? The knowledge, the idea that I have of myself and how I describe myself. And another is the self-expectation, which is who or what do I want to be, really. And that is my expectation from myself. That say I know that right now I am this person who is managing through whatever they're doing, managing through their work, and I'm this person who's hardworking, but then my expectation might be different as to, again, who or what do I really want to be, which is similar to the ideal self or the ought to self that we spoke about. Then there's the social self that's very, very important, which is how am I perceived by others, basically ends up influencing a lot my representation of myself. And a lot of times, a lot of us actually would end up describing ourselves based on this social self, as to, people think I'm like this and I'm like that. We sort of start conforming to that. The social self is very important. And there's the self-evaluation, which is basically the feeling component, and which is also something we call as self-esteem, which is the affective component, that how do I really feel about myself? How do I really evaluate or judge myself in terms of that image that I formed of myself, and it's my self-esteem. So what the self-knowledge that we spoke about, that is who am I think it's basically the global self. The who am I question is what comprises the global self, and it is used to describe the composite of all basic facts, qualities, traits, images, and feelings that one holds about oneself. So this is the larger basic question of who am I, and what everyone said. This can be answered based on a lot of different factors. So this global self that we're talking about, who am I, includes one, my basic facts. So we might answer based on what gender I am, age, race, occupation, culture I belong to, what is my position within social groups. So a lot of time my self-knowledge would also be, a lot of people might say, oh, I belong to this religious community, I belong to this, this is my social identity. And that position within social groups is what also comes within the global self. And then there could be specific qualities or traits that describe the typical behaviors, feelings, moods, and other characteristics that we may have. So this can be very specific as to, emotionally this is how I am, or I'm more assertive, or I'm more aggressive, or again, based on my behaviors, how do I typically respond. The next one we said was self-expectations. So again, the self-expectation, like we said, flows from various sources. It is determined by a lot of different factors in my life, and this ideal self is what constitutes the self that I want to be. So what do I expect out of myself? What is this ideal self that I have comprises of my self-expectations? And these are thought to develop very subconsciously early in childhood, based on, again, me observing what is really appreciated around me, what is validated around me, what are the things that people like, and what am I taught, like this is how people should be. And that is usually what leads to this ideal self. And a lot of times role models such as parents around me. Third component is self-evaluation, and this is what I said, the self-esteem is this evaluation component. So our self-esteem, when we say, oh, this person has a low self-esteem or this person has a high self-esteem, it's basically how they really feel about themselves. And it might actually not have anything exactly to do with who they, how they really define themselves in terms of this is my quality, or these are the characteristics, or these are this is the group I belong to. But it may actually be based on all of that. How do I feel about myself? Do I feel I'm enough? Do I feel I'm not? So that's that affect and that judgment that I have of myself. This self-esteem is also extremely important, as said by a lot of theorists. There's this very, very famous theory of personality also, which is Maslow's theory, which speaks about esteem needs, that each one of us in our life has certain esteem needs, which means that the self-esteem is a very important component in us actually moving through life and really moving to what we call actualization, that really reaching that point where we feel that we've achieved certain things, or at the peak, are at the peak. And this esteem need, the need to actually feel that enough about myself, the need to have a very good affect about how I look at myself, my self-image, is very, very important in growth for anyone. And this may be need for respect, need for, again, the social self, how validated I feel from others, the esteem that I feel from others also. So apart from the self-esteem, which again is a very, very important component of self-concept, what else can comprise a self-concept? There are certain ideas that we talk about. One is the identity of the person, another is our body image, which especially for children and adolescents is a very, very important part. So in terms of the components of the self, so we're talking about self-esteem, and apart from self-esteem there's identity, there's body image, and then there's something called role performance. We all fulfill a lot of roles in our lives, and that also feeds back into how I think about myself and my self-image and self-concept. So what are these different aspects? First is identity. So a sense of personal identity is what sets a person apart as a unique individual. I think someone here said that our uniqueness really matters in terms of how I feel I'm different from others. So the identity that we have, even if we belong to the same social group, even if we've had similar experiences in life, how I define myself, my personal identities might be very, very different. It begins to develop early in childhood and is, like we discussed earlier, constantly reinforced and modified throughout our life. So what I identify with, what my personal identity is, based on all the things that we spoke about, my knowledge, skills, abilities, my basic social demographic, my qualities, characteristics, it's actually modified throughout my life. So these are all the things that it may include. Another important concept here is the body image. So body image is an attitude about one's physical attributes, characteristics, appearance, and performance. This is also something that is forming as a child is growing up, and one of the first things they start noticing is how do I physically appear. And I think at that age it also is extremely important, and I think especially today when we see a lot of adolescents with body image issues and how they define their self and especially their self-worth primarily by their body image, how they're perceived, how that is perceived by others around them. So this body image is of course dynamic, and of course it's based on how our bodies are evolving, based on normal changes of growth and development that can affect it. But again, this is also an aspect which is not exactly objective. When we say it's a component of the self, it means also how I look at myself, what I think about my own appearance and my own physical attributes that comprises my body image. The third is role performance, which is again refers to a set of expected behaviors which is determined by familial, cultural and social norms. So each one of us at any point is basically fulfilling a lot of roles. I might be fulfilling a role at my work, I might be fulfilling a role in my relationships with my friends, in my relationship with my partner, in my relationship in the family. So there are a lot of roles, and this is basically based on what is expected out of me. At work, I'm expected to be this person who finishes their work, is hardworking. In terms of with my partner, I'm expected to be this person who acts in a certain way, who takes responsibilities in a certain way, fulfills certain roles and responsibilities. And our self-esteem, which is how do I really feel about myself, is a lot of times dependent upon how I perceive myself to be performing these roles. How well am I performing the role at my work? How well am I performing this role that I have at home of a mother, of a daughter? How well am I performing this role of a partner? And these various social roles also play a huge role in terms of affecting my self-esteem. So what affects this role performance? A lot of times how I perform in these various roles is affected by one role overload, which is if too much is expected out of me, and it is very, very natural for a person to feel burdened, to feel an overload due to the expectations that are of them. But then this would also make me feel like I'm failing or I'm not doing enough, and that can again affect my self-esteem. And the other thing that affects my role performance is role conflict. A lot of times the roles that I have might be in conflict with my own values. Say what is expected of me at work is in conflict with the values that I hold about certain things or my ideologies, or even a conflict between two roles where I'm expected to be a certain way, my partner expects me to act in a certain way, but then my parents expect me to act in a certain different way, and there's a conflict between the two roles. And these can be major stressors and can really affect a person's self-concept and self-esteem, because they will perceive themselves as failing in those roles. And when a person is unable to fulfill these role responsibilities, their self-concept takes a hit and is found to be impaired a lot of times. So how does the self-concept evolve over the years? Right, which will also tell us what can we do and at what age, what can we really be doing. So self-concept evolves throughout the life, and of course depends a lot on the developmental level that a person is at, especially for children and adolescents. So the infant learns that the physical self is different from the environment. So what we found is, our research shows that as a child we start learning the sensory motor responses that we do and how they have an effect on us. So say an infant learns that when I go and push something, then it falls. So they start realizing that the environment is separate from me. So I form this identity of me being different from the environment as a self. So that's my physical self, my body. And if my basic needs throughout childhood are met, then the child is more likely to develop positive feelings for self. So there could be, a child obviously has a need for security, a need for safety, a need for nourishment. So if these needs are found to be met, then they tend to develop more positive feelings about themselves. But if any of these needs are found to be unmet, then that may also become a barrier or a block in terms of how the child starts looking at themselves. So the child internalizes other people's attitudes towards self as they're growing up. They start internalizing. By internalizing, we mean that, oh, this person thinks like that about me, and then I sort of start believing that that is who I am, or that is what I believe about myself. So we internalize how other people are behaving towards us, what attitude they hold of ourselves. And we eventually also start internalizing the standard of society. So one is the attitude, that is what do people think of me, and then eventually the larger society, what is expected of me. And this is also important because you notice that, say, in contrast to India or the Eastern societies versus the Western societies, the self may develop very differently. Where in our culture, say, we are expected to be more collectivistic, we are expected to be more interdependent on each other, or more supportive, whereas in the West, they are appreciated more to be individualistic, to actually be by themselves and take care of themselves, and to be autonomous. So that would also determine my self-esteem. There it might be appreciated and they might think their self-esteem might be high if they're individualistic. But here it might actually make a person feel that they're only thinking about themselves. So that also affects our self-concept. So what happens in infancy, like I said, you develop a sense of personal agency very early in life. In the first 1 year of your life, the child starts to develop a sense of personal agency, which means that I can do some things and that is going to lead to a reaction from the environment. And they start to recognize themselves actually as a physical self. So that is when they start interacting with the mirror, might instead of taking things from the other person and do things themselves, which leads to some behaviors. And during early childhood, the definition starts getting more concrete. So they start mentioning more observable things about themselves, and they really describe the self. And they start describing themselves based on the things that they can do. Oh, I can do this particular activity. Oh, I can play this game. And that's how they start defining themselves. So they actually start seeing themselves in more global terms as early as before the age of 7. So in early childhood, if you ask a 3 or 5 year old when describing themselves and say, oh, I'm so and so, I got this red t-shirt, I'm this many years old, I can brush my teeth, I can wash my face on my own. So based on the activities, they may actually start defining themselves. And during middle childhood, they start to really organize their internal dispositions, and they start to verbalize who they think they are really. Internally, how are they feeling? Internally, what they understand about their behaviors. So this is where the multiple concepts of self start emerging. That I might be a certain person with my friends, and I might be a certain other person when I'm at home, and they start to understand these concepts of different selves. And this is also where they start mentioning their traits in terms of both positive and negative aspects a lot of times. So they might say, oh, I'm truthful but not pretty, I'm a good flutist but only average in studies. So they start recognizing that there are both aspects to myself. And during adolescence is when there is a whole reevaluation of the self happening. There's obviously, of course, a lot of things happening in the external environment, a lot of adjustments happening in the external environment, and a lot of social pressures to actually display different selves in different relationships, which can a lot of times also lead to going through this sort of identity sort of confusion or disturbance that adolescents go through because they're really trying to figure out who they are and define their question, and they're actually expected to display their different selves. That in academics they have to be, in school they have to be in a certain way, with a certain peer group you have to act in a certain way. They start having relationships or more friendships, and that leads to a lot of social pressure, and a lot of contradictory self-descriptions may increase, and they frequently, like I said, start to have a lot of identity confusion as to who am I, who is the real me, and they go through that period, every adolescent, of figuring this out. There's this very famous quote in Alice in Wonderland, wherein it says, "Who are you?" said the caterpillar, and Alice replies to that, saying, I hardly know, sir, just at present. At least I know who I was when I got up this morning, but I must have changed several times since then. So, that's how the self-concept basically works, that who you are at one point in time is not who you continue to be, but you might not know exactly at present who you are, because you gone through so many changes, and just 2 years back, this is how you were, but now, because of your environment, because of your experiences, you actually changed and might even have multiple selves. Yeah. So what are the factors that affect our self-concept? We have already spoken about there are various environmental factors that may affect our self-concept over the years, but a lot of times our health status may affect our self-concept. Our experiences. Now these are experiences everywhere. These can be a lot of difficult traumatic experiences. A lot of times if someone has gone through a trauma, it really changes how they look at themselves. It may really change their self-esteem, their self-concept. So various experiences we have at various stages in our life. A lot of developmental factors, of course, while we're growing up, as we change, like we said, over the years, that those development stages affect our self-concept. Our culture plays a huge, huge role in determining the self-concept that I have. So in terms of my culture, like you said, what is expected of me by the larger society? What are the things that are appreciated, that are liked, that are considered the good qualities or the not so good qualities of culture? And this is something that, of course, children nowadays are much more exposed to because of media, because of social media, because of all the things, the internet that they're exposed to. So the cultural influence is also much more of outside macro system. There could be internal and external resources that may affect. So, at particular point in time, how much support I have from the outside, what resources I have, more concrete resources, or my own internal resources in terms of how well I do something, how can I cope with things. My own coping can affect my self-concept, my idea of myself. Any successes or failures also affect, of course, my idea of myself. So the experiences of the child, the adolescent, based on the success or the failure that they experience, can be an important point in affecting their self-concept. Any stressors, any crisis situations, a lot of times people have a lot of self-doubts coming in, their self-esteem may change, their self-concept may change post any stressors. And of course, like we said, trauma, with aging, it's also been found actually that over the years our self-esteem changes. So it's found that at a certain age, when we are, in adulthood, our self-esteem actually reaches its peak, and then even during the later years, it might reduce a bit, and it continues to increase self-esteem from childhood to say adulthood in the late 20s or 30s, and after that it's found to dip down a little. So there's some generic graph about that, but of course it's very, very individualistic also. So how can you improve self-worth? Now, before we talk about this, I would want to hear from anything that anyone has about what do you think we can do to really improve self-worth. Now this can be in the context of children, what can we do for children, or for yourself. Yeah, you want to say something?
I would like to respond to this.
Yeah.
First is, if we are talking about the children,
Yeah.
first I think children on their own cannot develop anything at that age. The first thing is the adults have a responsibility there to teach them to accept themselves the way they are, rather than comparing, and in fact the adults also shouldn't much compare them a lot, and they also should accept the children the way they are. So that is how the children will also evolve, and they learn to accept themselves, they learn to appreciate themselves. That is one thing which we can do.
Absolutely, I think very, very important, and if we could just do that, is to accept.
Well, that will grow as a child gets into youth, gets into adolescence, gets into old age also. Even old age needs appreciation, because a lot of things you can't do at that age. So that level of appreciation will continue. So that is to be taught in the early stages.
Absolutely, the most formative years. If you're taught that, then probably we'll have such better coping skills for any stress that comes in life. Anything else?
Probably adding to her, like when she was talking about acceptance, so like not being too critical about a child and what they're doing, and like probably giving them the space to explore their environment, like you said, that because the child realizes how they are influencing the environment and the environment vice versa. So giving them that chance to explore and then sort of understand who they are can also sort of contribute to their
Giving them the space.
And limiting and evaluating our own judgments that we make about the world, because a lot of worth is connected to what we are fulfilling and what we are not fulfilling and what is being judged a certain way in society. So if we limit that ourselves, so the worth will not be limited to the judgment in the first place.
So if we just make that change even at ourselves, not just in instructing,
Yeah.
but also really do that for ourselves.
Please correct me if I am wrong. Giving a freedom to a child is the
Yeah.
best way to.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let them explore, let them figure things out, giving them the autonomy and that freedom. I think it's very important. Yes, so that's one way of definitely working on letting them explore and giving them the freedom, and a lot of times responsibility with that can help a lot.
And I think for yourself, it's very subjective, but like self-affirmations probably work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they do.
for yourself, just
Actually
to
do, yeah.
keep telling yourself that, okay,
Yeah.
this is who you are, or like this is what you need to do, or something,
Yeah.
or like not attach your worth on
Yeah.
basis of what others are saying. So probably.
Right.
And
So
for yourself.
self-affirmations
Also explore different avenues where one can try and one can improve upon one's skills and all that. That also adds on to self-worth. Because today I don't know whether I can, as a child, today I don't know I can read or write, whatever.
Right.
So first let that child have the opportunity to read or to write. Then if he can do it, don't just judge that no, you are a failure. It's okay, fine, it's not your skill, that's okay. So then that way also it adds on to his worth.
Right,
That is also
absolutely.
very
So encouraging them to actually
Yes.
develop those skills, but not, like you said, not in a
Yes.
judgmental way or pressure, but giving them the space, but also encouraging them to develop the skills that might help them is one way of building their coping and their self-worth.
Adding to her and the other participants here, I think it would help a lot if we have if we encourage positive interaction with the child, encourage them and keep asking them, this is the situation, what do you think? So that will help the child to start thinking and having their own opinions of how they want to see the world or how they see the world. And then of course children usually copy how the elders do. So if the elders are very positive, they would also eventually start looking at things in a very positive manner.
Absolutely. So if you just, give them that liberty, autonomy to even be involved in, like, in a democratic way, to make decisions and to really learn through that also by giving them that freedom, like you
So
said.
the elders should usually do hand holding rather than force them and tell them do this, do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Adding to the encouragement part, the child should also be encouraged to participate in the entire endless world. Like if there is a notification in the school that there is a painting competition, whether your child is a good painter or not, let him participate. Participation in itself is an experience. Whether you win an award, whether you win a prize, immaterial. But participation in itself is very important. This I am talking from my own experience. I never won anything, but I participated in everything.
Wow.
Only once I won, that was a debate competition. Other than that, I never won anything. But I participated in flower arrangement, salad arrangement, whatever competition, painting, whatever competition. So that is something which is very important.
Absolutely, that really builds on, okay, I can do things,
Yes.
and how, again, the self-fulfilling prophecy, that I'll be more likely to actually feel free to later on also
Yes.
participate without the pressure of winning.
Yes,
It.
and child also comes to know his own skills, whether, okay, I am not okay for flower arrangement, I am okay for a debate competition. So then the child builds up there, and then child puts in more effort to continue with those skills. So that is very important.
Right, so they learn where they really
Yes.
want to be, and instead of just exploring one area and just being there. It's very important to build the confidence and work.
Can I?
Yeah, absolutely.
Another thing that I think really helps children is the ability to help others. So once they start doing that, they feel very good about themselves.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. So encouraging them for social work, or just helping out at home, doing something for the family members,
Yeah.
makes them feel good about themselves and want it.
And I would like to add on to that also. If a child helps somebody or anybody, if a person helps, that person also comes to know his own abilities, where he's strong, and he feels good about it, that I can do this. So that I can do this feeling is also very important in developing self-worth.
Right. I think I agree with what you're saying, that yes, the child needs to also feel that they're doing something, they're contributing in some way. You can make sure that you arrange activities like these where you know that it's not about really succeeding or failing, but really about them just doing something they'll be really appreciated for. So that can definitely build on self-worth. Anything else anyone told? We can move on. Okay, so yes, I think a lot of things have been covered, so this might be a lot of repetition. But to go ahead with what improves our self-worth, we need to start identifying labels. There's something called labels that we use a lot of times for children, for adolescents. Even when we're talking at home, a lot of times adults would say, "Oh, you're so lazy. Oh, you're so naughty. You're so mischievous." And these labels really play a huge role in how the child starts to look at themselves. For any of us actually, if we hear 5 times from someone that, "Oh, you're this way," and we'll start thinking that, "Oh, that is how I am," and we start using that label for ourselves. So what are these labels? Personal label is like a name that over time may become our identity. So these can be these short words as to hardworking, which can be a positive label, versus lazy or mischievous or generous, again a positive label. So these are all labels, the adjectives that we use for the child or the adolescent or even the adult. So children develop an image of themselves as a result of, again, how I perceive the child externally, and then what label I use for the child. And these are expressed usually in labels that we use. So the first step usually to understand the child's self-worth and to really work on it is to identify if there are any labels that the child identifies with right now. And when a negative label becomes an identity, it actually is found to really affect our self-worth and our self-esteem. So what can you do? The things that people said: acceptance. Love your children for who they are, accept them for who they are. Encourage small achievements rather than pointing out their mistakes or failures. Enhance the qualities they have instead of blaming them for lacking the other qualities. Reward effort and completion rather than the outcome. Like you said that just for participation, just for the effort that they are making, they should be rewarded. Instead of saying, "Oh, you worked hard but then you failed, so what's the point?" So this is extremely important for accepting the child for who they are, really, to teach them acceptance of themselves. Encouraging their talents. So encourage your child's talents, encourage them to try, set very realistic expectations instead of saying, usually I know that every parent has the best of their child's best intentions for their children, but a lot of times we feel that pushing too much is the way to motivate. We go the tough love way, but actually it's been found through a lot of research that it really hampers a lot of times the child's confidence, because they might constantly be very outcome focused and might have very unrealistic expectations of themselves eventually. So we need to set very realistic expectations of the child, avoid comparisons with others, like someone said. The comparisons that we do really are very detrimental to self-worth. Recognize any improvement that they've made. So at the same time, the way to what we said in terms of pushing them forward is to actually recognize the small achievements that they're making instead of the big ones. But any small improvement needs to be appreciated for them to feel motivated. And of course, like someone here said, that first the adult has to manage their own expectations and really first themselves understand what they are looking for. Don't expect the child to excel in XYZ things just because we excel in those, or just because we feel that is what will help the child, instead of letting the child explore themselves what they really want to be. Giving the children importance, so which is also through one thing that someone said of just letting them be involved in decision making is when we're telling them that you're important and your voice is important. So respecting their likes and their dislikes. We are a lot of times very quick to at home also very quick to say, "Oh, you don't need to say anything here, it doesn't matter," or "No, you're wrong." But instead of that, even if the adult disagrees with what the child is saying, it's important to acknowledge that they have certain likes and dislikes and they may have certain opinions themselves. So asking for their opinion, encouraging children to be a part of decision making, particularly if it is concerning to them, so that they learn actually to really be independent and make those decisions and feel important, and showing interest in what they're doing. So a lot of times just being there, just showing interest and curiosity in terms of what the child is doing, what they like, what they don't like, is very, very important to show them that you're important and we're there and we're listening. So giving responsibility is also something that someone said that you need to give them responsibilities to make them feel that they're contributing in some way and build their self-worth. So assigning chores to the child that they can do on a daily basis, that they know is my responsibility, and again, so that is like recognizing those small achievements. Oh, today you did this, and they feel better about themselves, and so do others. And completing the chores gives them a sense of self-worth and confidence in their own ability. Like you said, that they'll start understanding what they're good at, and that they are really contributing in some way, and allowing the child to make an important contribution to the family by doing these responsibilities. Establishing routines is another way for them to feel, to actually have a sense of self-worth instead of, really them. A lot of times children might struggle with structure. They might struggle with doing that organization themselves, or structuring what they're supposed to do, and then they're called, oh, you're lazy or you're not doing anything. But sometimes just establishing those routines. So it's not about completely, letting them be also. As adults, we need to provide them with some structure and some routine so that they can, work through. So they do feel more secure when they have routines that are predictable. They have that sense of security around them. They also help children understand what is expected of them and how to reach those expectations. So a lot of times, I expect my child to actually be very efficient and do things at home. But unless I very concretely tell them, this is what is expected of you. Say I expect that, in the morning you just help me with this particular task. It's easier for them to follow it through instead of just guessing what adults are expecting out of us. Or expecting too much out of us. So being concrete about that helps. Monitoring the child's friendships. What it means is that, of course, peer group becomes very, very important as the child is growing up. So it is important. I mean, again, like I said, it's permissive parenting is not what we are saying here. We are saying that you need to be involved, but at the same time give the child the space. That also includes monitoring what influence that they may have, and also showing interest in their friendships, in their relationships, saying, okay, we are here, we want to know what's happening. So helping the child recognize peers who build up their self-worth is important. A lot of times, when a lot of adults come to us, they've had experiences of bullying in school, very difficult experiences in school, which have really, really affected their self-worth and how they feel about themselves. So there it becomes very, very important that as adults we also know what's happening in the child's life. They feel open to talk to us about it, and again, the influence is not just at home but also at school and outside the home. So just to monitor that influence, it's important to monitor the friendships. Helps the child develop his own value system, and may also help them recognize who are the peers that share their values, where they can actually feel more affirmed being around those peers. Allowing the child to express their feelings is very, very important. I think majorly what I see with a lot of adults I see is not having had that space as a child to express their feelings, because I think a lot of times we don't give it enough importance, because we are so stuck in the daily routine and daily tasks and school and studies and academics, that a lot of times we might be very dismissive of the child's feelings and say it's okay, just doesn't matter, just buckle up and just do it. So it's important that the child has a space to really express their feelings, because that's also, like you said, modeling, that they learn how to really become aware of their own emotions and be able to express it and not suppress those emotions and harbor them. So teach or prompt the child to express their feelings through words. Use a lot of labels to describe feelings. That's how we teach emotion regulation. Listen to your child in the sense of listen to your child, just listen, and not essentially be responding to them constantly, whether it's a right feeling or a wrong feeling. You just need to be there, listen. Be available to them and validate their feelings by restating what they've said. So a lot of times validation for feelings can be done by, say, someone expressing to me that oh, I was there and I don't know, I just felt like I was not feeling great about it, and just to restate and say, oh, you must be so angry about it. just reflecting on their feeling a lot of time helps. Be aware that listening or validating their feelings can be enough. So a lot of times we don't need to come up with a solution, and we don't need to be like, okay, come, I'll help you, or I'll talk to the teachers about it. A lot of times it's just about listening and being there and telling them that we understand what you're going through. So letting them understand their own emotions through that. Be a positive mirror. So how a child perceives them largely depends upon how you perceive them. So what you reflect back is what they are taking in. Right? So you need to be that mirror where the child, basically you're the mirror where the child is seeing themselves. And so the labels, like we said, that you use, or the things that you say to a child, is how they start looking at themselves. So value them for who they are and not just how they perform. But say, oh, this child is good in mathematics, this child is good in this thing. But sometimes just for being there, you're valued just for being there. You're valued just for being a part of our lives. That's what is important. So yes, like someone also said, telling them what they can do instead of what not to do. Again, something that we use a lot while growing up, where no is the word that is the first thing that is taught, where you can't do this, you can't do that. But probably telling them more about what they can do also helps while as they grow up. Being a good role model, as someone had said, that the things that we do as adults is basically what they are going to learn. So if we have a lot of self-doubts, if we ourselves have, are very conflicted about our own self-esteem, then that is also something that the child is going to take in. So avoid putting yourself down or highlighting one mistake that you've made. Say, I've made a mistake, and in front of the child I feel like, oh my god, I made this mistake. And the child is going to learn that it's not okay to make mistakes. So you need to send the message that it's okay to not be perfect to the child. Playing with the child. The children who are very small, again, it's about spending time with the child, and playing with the child actually gives the message that you're worth, they're worth your time, that they're valuable. So playing with the child, for the child, that's the most important activity. So you being a part of it is telling them that you're there, is telling them that they're worthy of your attention, your time. So child-initiated activities has been found to increase self-worth, and they are able to hold their attention much longer when there are adults involved who are also paying attention to them. So giving them undivided attention is very, very important. Monitoring the parenting style, again, like we said, so the parenting style we are talking about here is not that you need to be permissive and you need to just let the child do what they want to do, but it's also about, again, the warmth that you're giving the child, the amount of control you're trying to exert in the child. Help your child understand that they can't always get their way. It's not about whatever they want to do, you let them do, but not do that in a critical way, like we discussed. That it doesn't have to come out of criticality, it doesn't have to come out of using negative labels, but again, therefore the routines, establishing boundaries, having very clear rules at home. So the warmth element is still there. You may still want to have some aspect of how the child, what you expect out of the child, but you need to sort of add to it the warmth that you provide to the child. So encourage social competence to give and take together and separate time. So while there is time that you have with the child, they also have time for themselves, and you also have time for themselves. So those boundary setting is also quite important here. Again, it is good for decision making. I think you all said that yes, they need to be a part of decision making, but it's not that you should just leave the child to make all the decisions themselves, in which case it's extremely permissive, and we need to give them structure. Again, showing respect for the authority figures in your child's world, which means that a lot of times there may be other authority figures in the child's world, and if there is a conflict, saying, oh, your teacher said this, oh, that's rubbish, the child may become very, very confused as to who am I supposed to believe and what am I supposed to think. So it's important that we also respect the other people who are influencing them, and that is how we also role model that. Again, this is something that we've discussed. Being accepting is also through being spontaneous and being affectionate with the child, and giving physical affection a lot of times. Maybe not something that a lot of parents did earlier also, but physical affection is found to be very, very important. The child also be learned to be comfortable with that, to be comfortable in expressing their affection. when they want to. Surprising them again and being playful and being genuine with your child is a long way in expressing that you care for them and you value them. What to avoid? So I think we've discussed this too, that expecting too much or too little from your child. I know it's very tricky and it's not something which, it's not about being the perfect parent. It's just about assessing at this point, what do I think is okay for my child to be doing? What are the things that they're good at, and then probably just encouraging those instead of what else they can do or what they're not doing. So yes, maintaining that optimal balance. Excessive and harsh criticism, of course, negative feedback, especially when given in front of other people, can play a huge role in affecting their self-esteem. So criticism, criticality in childhood has also been found that, again, when I see a lot of adults with anxiety-related concerns, a lot of it might also come from a lot of criticality which they internalize, and then every time they make a mistake, that voice in their head which probably the adult used when they were children pops up and says, oh, how could you make that mistake, you can't do that. So that's how it affects their self-esteem. Not allowing them to make mistakes. Again, someone said that it's important to let them make mistakes. It's important to tell them that it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to make mistakes. It's very, very important, especially as they grow up to be adults and they're going to have so many responsibilities and they're going to end up making some mistakes and they might be overburdened. So that's important. Constant comparison with others, not respecting or honoring their uniqueness, it's important to avoid that. Comparisons, like we said, is something that's very, very harmful. It's important to respect their uniqueness. So, the key takeaways, I think we've covered a lot of things and I could hear a lot of things from the audience, but just to give the takeaways, put children in situations where they can succeed at doing what you want them to do. Again, someone said that sometimes adults can anticipate that when a child does this, they're more likely to succeed or feel good about themselves, and that's where you put them. As an adult, that's also your responsibility. If the child does not succeed in a specific situation, and determine what is undermining the child, then determine what is undermining the child's attempts and help solve that problem. So again, like someone said, that if you feel that yes, the child is not being able to do something, then you still sort of encourage them. You might sometimes sit with them and say, okay, what else can we do here? Instead of saying, oh, you couldn't do this. You determine with them what could have happened and can we do something? So again, you being part of that process, and again, role modeling, problem solving for them can be very important. Be appreciative and praise the child for desired behaviors. Discussed. Visualize your child as already being a new positive label and then relate to the child with the new label. So if you know that the child has internalized some negative labels about themselves, it can be that you recognize that and then try to replace it with a positive label. Whether it's children, adolescents, adults, I think for all of us this is important that we start using more positive labels for ourselves constantly, and that's also where self-affirmations work. Show respect for the child's feelings and opinions, even though you might not agree with them. So you might not say what the child is saying, you don't agree with it, but you still need to respect and hear them out. And lastly, be patient. So I know all of this that we discussed is not easy, and it's not that you can be perfect. Any of us can be perfect in that, but we just need to be patient, and that's again not easy, but if we try. Thank you.